Odds and Ends by Corndog_Patrol and For the Wolfie on AO3. Chapter 2 Unlikely Servants. The night was cold, thanks to the stupid thin materialed shirt Emmy had forced him to wear. Apparently, it was a tradition, but Shouta was doing all he could to hide the fact that he was freezing. He must have been doing a poor job at it, because the stupid blonde vampire asked, "Wanna borrow my coat?" No. Should've refused to look at him. He didn't need to, since the vamp's appearance had already been nailed into his mind. The scum, who looked like a cartoon villain, with formal black and red clothes, a top hat, and a monocle, and a corny mustache. His ears were pointed, like every vamp's, although they were more rounded than most. The only parts of him that didn't scream imperial vampire were his long blonde hair and his emerald green eyes, although the irises had turned red during the earlier frenzy. The bloodletting had been a dirty move on Shota's part, but it had earned him his results. As usual, he needed this vampire to buy him, and his own temper had almost cost him his chance. Thankfully, all bloodsuckers were the same. The only way to get their attention was to spill a bit of red. That was the first lesson you learn as a vampire slayer, and Shota had been in the business for a long time. Emmy had given him several earfuls, and he admittedly deserved them. But it was also just so difficult to show a vamp any respect, especially when they were an annoying rich snob. How was he supposed to act grateful? How could anyone be grateful about being bought as a leech's food source? "I think here's good," the vamp said as they stopped in the middle of an empty street. A thick mist clung to the air, ensuring each breath was heavy, and the street lamps overhead were swatched in dirty film. Shota's instinct screamed danger. "Here?" He glanced around but saw no carriages. The vampire loomed closer to him, and Shota took an automated step back. "You really riled me up before," the blonde explained, voice low. "No biting is allowed in government buildings, but now we're out here. I'd appreciate a little taste test." The very idea of a vampire biting his neck and drinking his blood made Shota sick to his stomach. He'd known it would be inevitable in this line of work, and becoming the leech's blood bag had been the best, surest way to guarantee his plan's success. However, Shota had expected more time to brace himself. "You can't even wait till you get home." "Well, I was planning to, but now, after smelling your blood, I don't think I could possibly wait." The blonde leaned over close to him, and it took all of Shota's willpower not to back away or snap his neck. "I promise I won't drink much, just one mouthful, and I'll give you the rest of the night to settle at home." If he refused, the vamp would probably just take him back to Emmy and demand a different blood bag. Oh, he gets suspicious about his uncooperationness. Chota recalled the reason for doing all of this, his plan, and he found the strength to brush his hair away from his neck. His senses screamed at the vulnerability of the position, and he hated putting any level of trust in the hands of a vamp. It went against everything he stood for, but he was desperate. "Fine, drink up." The vamp relaxed a little at his willingness. He must have been listening to his heartbeat, but Shota ensured the pace never changed, despite the resentment boiling away beneath his skin. The blonde hovered his mouth over Shota's exposed neck, but there was a hesitation that almost made Shota's heart skip a beat. Could the creature smell the faintness remnants of the silver collar he recently wore? He'd washed so thoroughly before this, but then the vampire bit his neck. Alarm bells roared in Shota's head at the first trace of pain, and he knew 1,000 ways to stop the vampire, but all he could do was stand there like a stupid sheep. The pain ended shortly after the puncture. The sensation of his blood being sucked through those two sharp fangs, like fucking silly straws, felt odd. Goosebumps raised across his skin, and he exhaled a puff of air which turned blistering white in the cold. No, it didn't feel odd anymore, although he wished it had. That would have been a better alternative to it feeling good. Then the teeth pulled away, and a tongue ran across the two circular wounds, greedily lapping up the excess. Shouta had to resist the urge to shudder. His entire body tingled, and his skin had warmed, despite the cold and minor blood loss. He lost control of his heart rate, and it involuntarily sped up. Bites from vamps were supposed to feel good, thanks to an anesthetic in their saliva, but he hoped his hatred would make him immune to it. The very idea of humans unwillingly enjoying being drained only slurped his anger up. He looked at the monster, who looked just as surprised as him. A small smear of liquid, reddening his lips, and his face was flushed, probably with Shota's own blood. The monster's breathing was harder, his pupils dilated, eyes scarlet, and the tremble in his lip suggests he was far from full. As promised, however, he'd only taken a mouthful. "You okay?" asked the creature, a voice huskier than ever, and Shouta managed to remember his name was Hizashi. Not that it really mattered. Although the vamp was asking, the monster didn't care. Shouta covered the bite mark with his hand and scowled. Vampire bites always scarred. The deed was done, and Shouta would forever have the scar to prove it. There was no going back now. Live up to your expectations. Shouta turned around and was about to continue through the cold street, but was stopped when something warm weighed down his shoulders. He jolted and reached for his dagger, but his belt was weaponless. Even the pack he carried in his other hand only had a few personal, unhelpful items inside. However, he quickly realized that it was the vamp's coat that covered his shoulders. It was far warmer than the paper-thin blouse, although he hated that it smelled like the bloodsucker. "Sorry, you'll be able to relax once we're home," Hisashi said, and his voice had a different pang to it that Shouta couldn't decipher. The vamp was probably cold without the jacket, but the material of his own blouse, at least, looked thicker than Shota's. Besides, his flushed face didn't suggest he was cold at all. Shouta pulled the jacket closer around his shoulders. He followed the vamp, his neck aching, but not as much as his pride. It wasn't a carriage that was waiting for them, but a car. This leech really must have been loaded to afford one. Someone was leaning against the vehicle. His hair reflected a cloud-like quality as it waved and billowed about him. Most of it was off-white. There were traces of purple threatening through it. Just one look told Shouta that that was another vamp. He could spot one a mile away, even in this for God's saken mist. The new vamp perked up at the sight of them. "Hey! You got there in time, Hisashi!" His gaze landed on Shouta. One of the chauffeur's eyes was yellow, while the other was blue. "Oh, is this him? Whoa, you got a strong one." "You're safe now," Hisashi said crisply, only loud enough for Shouta to hear. Before he could question it, he was guided into the back of the car seat, and the door was shut behind him. Hisashi sat in the front, so Shouta had the entire back seat to himself. He had never been in a car before. The seats were smooth, and the windows were large. The sound of the engine was far different than the sound of horses, and when they moved, there was no rhythm clopping for hooves. Fortunately, the driver didn't go too fast. "So," started the chauffeur, "what's your name?" "Shouta." "Whoa, that's a cool name. I'm Oboro Shirokuma. It's really nice to meet you. You're really gonna love the manor." The vampire rambled on for the entire drive, but Shouta quickly tuned out. He was watching out the window as the factory district disappeared into the distance, and was soon replaced by fancy elite mansions. All of these belonged to upper-class vampires. Shouta could only feel sour at the sight of the splendor, and he automatically rubbed the wound on his neck. If he felt safe at all, he might have slept during the car trip. He was certainly tired enough, but his senses were too high-wired by the nearby vamps. Or at least Oboro had turned this conversation to Hizashi, and they were happily chatting away while Shouta was silent. Soon they pulled into a dirt pathway that looped in front of a large manor house. Shouta couldn't help but stare at the building, with mild resentment as it engulfed his view. The home was illogically large, with 3 stories and sweeping, immaculate grounds. The front was supported by the tall marble pillars that were covered in creeping vines, and twin staircase that led up to the entrance, while an oracle fountain merely chunked water between. On the steps of the manor placed a hulking figure that could only be another vampire. Shouta glanced around the car for anything that could be used as an improvised weapon, but the back seat was completely cleaned out. As soon as the car stopped, the large vamp beelined for Hisashi's passenger side and flung it open, growling, "You left without me." Despite the tone, Hisashi didn't act at all threatened by the larger monster. "I came home in one piece, so it turned out all right." The blonde glanced at Shouta and then turned his attention back to the possible guard, speaking in a lowered voice. "Can we not do this here, Khan? I didn't want to scare the human." The guard looked at Shouta too, and the human was surprised by what he saw. The vamp had fangs on his lower jaw, instead on the top. He was a freak, even by vampire standards. Shouta had heard of cases like that in the past. Often the parents would let the child die since they couldn't feed properly. Even though vamps had survived beyond infancy, he would have faced a lot of prejudice, and he was surprised to see him working for an upper-class manor. The bodyguard glowered at Shouta, and he glowered right back. "He doesn't look like the sorts to get scared," murmured the leech. At the very least, this guard had good instincts. Before there was a response, the car door opened for him, and Shouta was greeted by the cloud-haired vamp. "Welcome to the Yamada Manor," he eagerly declared. "Don't worry about Glenn here. He seems all gruffy and scary, but he's actually a super softy." Khan scowled, and Shouta was unconvinced. He stepped out of the car and swept his eyes over the manor again. In the window, he thought he saw the vague silhouette of a woman, but she quickly hurried out of view before he could get a better look. "Feeling okay?" Shota's eyes twitched at the voice of the blonde. "Feeling okay?" Shota's eye twitched at the voice of the blonde, although the vamp kept a little more distance than he had earlier. "It'll be warmer inside." Shouta only realized then that he still wore the coat wrapped around his shoulders. He was quick to pull it off. He could practically hear Emi's voice in his head, warning him in the form of a joke about how far from charming he was acting. "If I was Mr. Yamada, I would have signed you up for etiquette classes already." Shouta held it out for Hisashi. He didn't want to look at him. His eyes were still caught on the house. "I'm fine," he said firmly. The blonde vamp was about to take it, but instead it was grabbed by the bodyguard, who scowled darkly at him with an upside-down mouth. Hisashi shot Khan a look. "It's okay," he said, his tone finally bearing some authority. "Be nice. You don't know how rough he's had it." Shouta was once again reminded of the typical sort who signed up to be a blood bag. Desperate people without food, shelter, and family. Shouta hadn't fit the stereotype until only recently. Shouta was desperate. He wouldn't be doing this if he wasn't. But he wasn't the sort of desperate they all expected. However, he said nothing to dispel their expectations, as he stared up the stairs. Hisashi followed at his side, with Khan, while Oboro left to move the car. The front door were made of some dense, malleored and wounded iron that indicated design echoed into them. They both towered above Shouta until the bodyguard stepped forward and flung them open. The entrance room was large, with high vaulted ceilings and a chandelier, impressive columns, shiny tiles, plenty of doors, and more stairs. Two figures were waiting for them inside, their eager grins already in place. The first was a male vampire in a wheelchair, which was strange to see considering the healing ability of vamps. He looked tired, but was dressed in a nice suit that gave away his occupation as a butler. Around the waist was a large leather strap that appeared to keep him buckled into the chair. The second attendant, to his surprise, was a human. She wore a maid's dress that covered her from neck to floor, leaving very little skin visible. Hello, the butler greeted. It is a pleasure to meet you. Welcome to the Yamada Manor. I'm Tensei, the butler of this household, and this here is Namuri, our maid. We'll be taking care of you during your stay, and if you need anything, then all you have to do is ask. Your name? Shouta, he said slowly, glancing again at the human woman. I think it's best he has tonight to settle, Hizashi said, removing his hat and coat so he would place them on the rack beside the door. Namuri, can you please take him to his room? You can have a proper tour tomorrow, as I imagine he's exhausted. Namuri nodded eagerly and curtsied. Right this way, Shouta. She turned and hurried up one of the staircases, and he decided it was safe to follow her, although his mind was chugging over the idea of a human woman willingly working in a mare full of leeches. And then again, the fact that she covered most of her skin spoke poorly of the place. Had they been feeding on her? If so, she put on a rather convincing smile. As he left, he heard the vamps talking amongst themselves, but he was unable to tune into their words. The house was beautiful, with sweeping corridors full of art and color, lined with innumerable doors. He was impressed the woman knew what door to stop at, and she gestured happily to it. This will be your room. I'm really looking forward to knowing more about you. It'll be really cool having another human around. Her eyes glanced to the bite mark on his neck. You're really brave, by the way, but you have nothing to fear here. Tensei introduced me earlier, but I should probably properly introduce myself. She offered her hand and grinned. Namuri Kamaya, it's a pleasure to meet you, Shouta. By the sound of it, she'd been brainwashed, but he didn't hold that against her. He politely took her hand. Thank you. Once this was over, he'd rescue her and get her some proper help. Her eyes landed on his neck again, and her expression softened. Hisashi's really sweet. I guarantee he'll stick to the same bite location, so you won't have multiple scars. If he ever makes you uncomfortable or anything like that, just tell him and he'll listen. Before he could say anything on the topic, she turned and opened the door. The room was just as exquisite as the rest of the manor, and it alone was larger than Shota's entire ex-apartment. It was clean, although disused, and contained very typical necessities. The bed was king-side, swathed with elegant silk sheets, and pillows galore. There was a large window, too, with a balcony overlooking the rear gardens. Someone had set up a vase of purple flowers, which filled the room with their gentle, sweet aroma. Shouta paced around the room, absorbing everything else the space had to offer, from its soft carpets to a particularly full bookcase, a sofa and a desk, complete with ink and parchment. If this was a guest room, he couldn't imagine how lavish the other rooms must be. Dinner will be brought up soon. There are a few books in the bookshelves. Can you read? He nodded. Great, there's a library too in case the ones here aren't to your taste, but I'll show it to you tomorrow when you're more adjusted. She gestured to the small lever and bell system on the side of the wall. If you ever need anything, just pull on here, and either Tensei or I will be with you as soon as possible. Thank you. She nodded, but seemed hesitant to go. Hey, did something happen before? The question caught him off guard. Hisashi seemed a little off. I know you're not really familiar with him, but if something happened, then I'd like to know. Shouta shook his head and rubbed his neck. He arrived late, nearly didn't sign the papers, and drank a mouthful of blood. Nothing out of the ordinary for a leech. Her face grew disheartened, and at first he thought it was from Hisashi's action, but instead she says, "Please don't call Hizashi that." He was surprised by the request. Shouta was so used to hearing the term that it was jarring to hear another human scold him for it. Vampires were leeches, parasites that survived off of blood from other species without giving anything back. However, she looked genuinely unsettled by the use of the word. Maybe the vamps pushed anyone who referred negatively to them. Maybe she was trying to warn him. "I'll avoid the term," he promised after careful consideration, and Numeri was relieved. "Thank you. I can guarantee you'll have a relaxing life here. It might sound too good to be true, but the hard times are behind you now." Numeri smiled again, and it was soft and sweet. "At least, I hope you'll be here for a long time. You're Hisashi's type after all." The last sentence threw him off entirely. "You mean blood type?" She snorted and put her hands on her hips. "Don't you know Mr. Hizashi Yamada is one of the most famous bachelors in the vampire world? Everyone's looking to get a piece of him, and you already got a head start." She winked. He was even more perplexed. "But all due in time. Dinner will be up soon, and afterwards I'll draw you a hot bath. Please relax and check out your room while you wait." And with that, she was gone, although he was still scratching his head over the strange comment she'd made. The bed was too good to resist. He laid back on it and watched the ceiling. He was tired. A nap would do him well, despite any potential danger. Eraserhead could handle any surprises. The Slayer closed his eyes, but as he was drifting off, something Numeri said refused to give him peace. She told him the worst was now behind him, and he wished that was the truth. However, the Slayer knew better. In truth, the worst was yet to come.
Oh my god, I know secrets. I know stuff. I know what you don't know.
Let's just say I know, one, why Numeri is there, why Numeri wears what she wears. I know why Hizashi was acting, and I quote, different. I think you find out in the next chapter, which, when I found out, I thought was absolutely hilarious. I know why Shouta is desperate. I know so much, and you don't know. And I'm holding that over you. And I'm happy about it, because for once, I'm in the know. I am in the know, and you don't know. You will have to stay in the unknown. But yeah, sorry that this video is like 37, it's probably going to be 50 minutes late, let's be honest. It's going to take like a while for it to download to my laptop, then upload it onto YouTube. But sorry that it's, a little under an hour late. I genuinely didn't think what I was doing beforehand would take so damn long. I was told we would finish at 10 in the morning, not at freaking past 4. We literally just got here a little bit ago, and I already had most of this video recorded for last night. I just couldn't finish it last night because the children were literally screaming bloody murder, and I couldn't record without them in the background, and then I ended up sleeping early that night. So, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get this one on time. As for Villainous Heroics, I will try to get that out on time. No promises. I'm going to record it as soon as I end recording this one and I do all the upload stuff for this one. But, yeah. So, if it comes out being late, I apologize. And then I'm going to rest. I think tomorrow is going to be a huge recording day for me because I'm going to go with my dad tomorrow at like 9 p.m. PST, and I'm just going to be with him for like three days. So I need to record Sundays and Mondays videos. That's going to be fun. It's going to be amazing. And then I have a funeral I have to go to. Nobody close to me, I guess. I mean, I saw him once in a while. He was in the family, but I don't even know his name. And I have to also plan for that. I don't even know when it's gonna happen. I really hope I get informed beforehand because that is a 2-day trip. And hopefully I don't get blindsided and you guys stay without, content for 2 days. Let's hope not. One can only hope. But yeah, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content. And thank you so much for watching. Oh yeah, my Discord server is also linked in the description. Thanks for watching.